welcome to this, the third part of my brief and possibly slightly unreliable history of the Birmingham Canal Navigations. In this episode we are going to look at the southern BCN. Now if you remember, we imagined the BCN to look roughly like a London Underground tube sign, so today we are looking at the bottom semicircle of the tube sign. Although this canal is in fact not part of the BCN at all. This is the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal, and it was finished in 1771 before the Birmingham main line, the first bit, was built, and it was tremendously successful and is more or less the reason why the BCN exists in the first place. The good people of the Birmingham Canal Company wanted to connect to this canal to open up the possibilities for trade, and indeed they did so, about 5 miles north of here. But in fact, if you have a look, you will see another canal right here going off to the right. And so this is, on our London Underground sign, left-hand part of the sign where the bottom of the semicircle starts. So let's go up and take a closer look. Okay, so why does this canal exist at all? Well, this canal is built across the land of and goes towards the coal mines of Lord Dudley. And he already had a set of coal mines and a small sort of proto-tunnel into a mine which unloaded his coal onto the Birmingham Canal. And that's fine, but he had to pay the Birmingham Canal an awful lot of money to transport his coal. So he thought, well, if we build, or if he encourages, a canal from a new junction up to the other side of his minings, up in Dudley, then he can carry all that coal and he wouldn't have to pay the Birmingham Canal anything. And so that's what, well, he personally didn't do it, he just sponsored the bill through Parliament. Now, if we've learnt anything about the Birmingham Canal's actions over the past couple of episodes, we know that they are not happy with the idea of rival canals coming in and nicking their trade. And they had a bit of a playbook which they operated in order to try and stop it. And playbook number 1 was to object to the Act of Parliament. So they strongly objected to the Act of Parliament building the canal from here, near Stourbridge, up to Dudley, and the Act was defeated. Much like with the Wyrley and Essington Canal, broadly what happened is they brought the Act back with some minor changes and essentially got it through. But they got it through in a slightly odd way. They got it through as 2 separate Acts. They got it through as the Stourbridge Canal up as far as Blackdelf, and the Dudley Canal from Blackdelf up to Parkhead. Now then, it is, by all accounts, one canal. There is no junction between the Stourbridge and the Dudley canals. It's just at some point or other the channel stops being called the Stourbridge and starts being called the Dudley. But that was the means by which they could get the Act of Parliament through. And so in about 1775, so we're talking after the Birmingham Canal's been going for only 2 or 3 years really, they started work on it. By the way, as we go past, it's a rather sad looking sunken boat, thoroughly vandalised, and with stuff like the engine has been nicked and the rudder and all sorts of stuff, so that's a bit sad. Anyway, let's crack on with the story. Well, here we are at the top end of the Stourbridge Canal. I'm standing on a little bridge which goes under the three and goes nowhere, which is not a particularly uncommon sight of the BCN, where every corner seemed to have a tiny little wharf or a tiny little finger or a abandoned canal or something kicking off it. It's actually none of those things here, but I'll explain that in a minute. What we do have is we have the end of the Stourbridge Canal and the beginning of the Dudley Canal, and the junction is there. So it's not particularly easy to see where one ends and the other starts, and that would be because they were only ever really designed to be one canal, and it's the sort of legal fiction of an Act of Parliament that turned it into two canals. Now, up here we have got the Black Delph locks, known also as 9 locks, and we're going to walk up them, and the more perspicacious amongst you might be able to work out why they are known as 9 locks. Let's go. Well, here we are at the top of 9 locks by 9 locks Bridge, and have we worked out why it is that they are called 9 locks? Yes, you're right, it's because there are 8 of them. Now, this isn't some sort of terribly complicated boatman's joke, but if you have a look at the alignment of this lock, you will see it's not pointing down the line of the locks, it's actually pointing off to the left. And our answer to why 9 locks lies down there. So let's go and take a look. Well, if we go through the bridge that doesn't go down the lock flight, we find it quite quickly comes to an abrupt end. And if we wander on a little bit further, we find this. Now, buried in the woods, just beyond the end of the canal, is what suspiciously looks like, another lock. Now, it's quite difficult to get down there, especially in shorts, but if you're thinking it's a bit funny that when they filled in this lock, they left the lock gates there and didn't actually fill in the lock and have suspiciously nice and neat new brickwork, then you'd be right. This lock is sort of maintained as an example of what the abandoned BCN looks like. You can see all sorts of ex-paddle gear. Actually, this wasn't originally on this lock, it's been sort of taken off a knackered lock and put on just as an example. However, originally there were 9 locks at 9 locks, and it followed this line down. And if we can take a look down the side wall of the lock, it's not terribly clear, but you can see that the water there is maybe 6 inches below the lock wall, and the water at the bottom of the lock there is maybe 2 feet below the bottom of the lock wall. This whole lock has subsided. The bit we're standing on is whole feet lower than it used to be. That's because of mining activity in the area, and so in the 1840s they had to abandon this line of locks and build the new line of locks, which is up over there. That's nothing particularly to do with the history of the BCN, but it's a nice thing to come and see. Right, let's crack on. This is the Parkhead Basin, which for about 20 years was the head of the Dudley Canal. So in the 1770s, Lord Dudley had 2 canals doing what he wanted. He had one canal up near what is now the Black Country Living Museum, which is over that hill there, and he had this canal, and the stub of canal up at the BCLM went onto the Birmingham Canal, and this one went down the Stourbridge Canal and joined on the Worcester and Birmingham. But Lord Dudley had a problem, and the problem wasn't, for example, that the average life expectancy of his miners was 40-something years. No, although that was true. And his problem wasn't that children kept on getting killed in his mines, although that was also true. In fact, he is on record as saying that that wasn't so much of a problem because it only took 6 or 7 years for the miners to make new ones. A nice man, Lord Dudley. No, his problem was that both the Birmingham Canal and the Worcester and Birmingham Canal were charging him iniquitous rates to carry his coal on their canals. In fact, the Worcester and Birmingham Canal charged an extra special higher rate to any coal that came off the Stourport Canal and this Dudley Canal. And so he needed some more options. And the options come a little bit further up above these next 2 locks. Let's go and have a look. This is my favourite spot in the whole of the canal network. It is the new Parkhead connection. And right in that distance there you'll see the solution which Lord Dudley came up with. You see, he'd already built a tunnel into his mines a couple of miles that way, and so all he had to do was extend the tunnel out towards here, and you had a direct connection from the Birmingham Canal to the Dudley Canal, and he could carry his coal either one of which way. Now, both ways charged him iniquitous tolls, but he could now play one off against the other, be it the Birmingham Canal Company or the Worcester and Works and Staffordshire Canal Company. So, the other thing that could happen is that you could have a couple of private arms built. This used to be called the Pensnick Canal. It's now about 40 yards long, but it used to go a couple of miles in that direction. Actually, this is one of the ones where filling it in was a good idea. It was horribly polluted. And then over there is the Graysbrook arm, which went to the Graysbrook Colliery. Ironworks, my apologies. So that should tell you that this area was nothing like so idyllic as it is now. We're in a nasty, dark, dank place full of pollution. Nevertheless, nowadays it is beautiful. And if we go back down again, we can see the second solution which Lord Dudley came up with to keep his costs down. So we're back down at, well, what is technically the old Parkhead Basin, is now known as Blowers Green, because there used to be a massive steam engine up there which blew lots of noise and soot and all the rest of it into the air. And here we are at Lord Dudley's last cunning plan, more or less as soon as he'd finished the Dudley No. 1 tunnel. So we now had a route up through the Birmingham Canal Company, and he had a route out towards the Staffs and Worcestershire Canal. And over in that corner there you can see his solution number 3. Yes, it is another canal. This is the Dudley No. 2 canal, and this one sought to bypass the Birmingham Canal altogether so that he wouldn't have to pay tolls to them at all. And what he did was he built that down towards a canal which was in fact not built yet. That was the Worcester and Birmingham Canal, and that went down and came out towards the bottom of it, where you could then turn left and go back up to Gas Street, where there was that stop lock we had a look at in episode 1. So that completes the bottom of the circle of our tube map sign. Let's go and have a look what happened to Dudley No. 2 Canal. Right then, here we are on the Dudley No. 2 Canal at Leaso's, and as you can see, it does not look terribly navigable, and that's because it isn't. If you cross over that main road there and go another 200 yards or so, it becomes navigable, and you can follow it all the way back up to Parkhead where we were. But that only remained open because there was one of the last major businesses still using the canal which survived up to the 1960s. Going down that way, you go down through the Lapal Tunnel and you come out at Selly Oak on the Worcester and Birmingham Canal. Unfortunately, the Lapal Tunnel collapsed in 1917, and it has now been so comprehensively destroyed that there is not even a trace of the portals. Not even a dip in the grass. When they built a motorway across it, they filled in large quantities of it. That is never opening again. However, there is a plan to take this canal and reopen it via partly this bit and partly a new route. And I guess maybe one day this canal will see boats again. So this is a sort of slightly odd end to this video, I guess, because we're ending on a sort of slightly sad piece of dereliction. However, it is worth noting that the greed of Lord Dudley in building another sort of rival canal to the Birmingham Canal, and also the people who built the Wyrley and Essington Canal, also roughly parallel to the Birmingham Canal and also a rival, is actually what saved most of the Birmingham Canal Navigations. You see, this story ends in a very familiar way. You will have already discovered in parts 1 and part 2 that the standard playbook of the Birmingham Canal Birmingham Canal Company was 1, to stop rivals by objecting in Parliament, which held up both the Dudley and the Wyrley and Essington for a while. 2, to put in as many obstacles as they possibly could to them being a success, hence things like the stop locks and so on, discussed around the system. 3, to charge iniquitous rates to anyone who was trying to use the canals. And then finally, when nothing else would do, 4, to buy the rival canals. And buy the Dudley Canal they did. Technically speaking, they merged with the Dudley Canal Company in 1840. But what that did was create this one massive network of canals, quite a lot of which we've seen over the past few episodes, which snaked its way in and around the Black Country. And when the railways came, as they did, to the whole country, they didn't have quite the same effect on the Birmingham Canal Navigations as they did on other canals. You see, by that point, the Black Country was so heavily industrialised that there simply wasn't the space to drive railways into the centre, or at least not very extensively. It turned out to be much cheaper and easier to build railway interchange basins at various points along the network, where the stuff was taken off the trains and put onto canal boats and carried the last mile or two to their destination. So in a funny way, the coming of the railways actually saved these canals. What we're going to do in the last and final episode of this series is we're going to look at the decline of the BCN, some of the ways in which the 160 miles of Birmingham canals turned into 100 miles of Birmingham canals. And along the way, and it should come as no surprise that this process mostly happened in the 1950s and 60s, we're going to go and see what we can find in terms of lost canals. This is one of the stretches, and quite a lot of the other stretches are simply gone. There is virtually nothing left of the Bentley Canal at all, not a single trace. Just about 10 yards into the first lock at one end, and a couple of very, very obscure traces at the other. But we'll go and we'll have a look at some of the bits of the canal system where there are some traces. If you're interested in canal hunting, by the way, I strongly suggest that you search on YouTube for Andy Tidy's channel called Canal Hunter, which is really interesting. In the meantime, I will see you guys next time, and if you enjoy these videos, please do like and subscribe. Goodbye.